Yeah, there we
Yeah.
are.
Hi, Mark. Great
Hey.
to see you here. Mark is a member of our Philosophy of Freedom group over on Urphenomen, Matt and Ashton's channel. And we've had a conversation before about tech and IT and anthroposophy and the philosophy of freedom. And Mark said so many interesting things in that conversation. I actually wanted to get some of it on video so that he can share his insights. So, Mark, I know you got a little bit of you got quite a substantial background in tech. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in tech, and then we'll move into ChatGPT and other topics as we move along.
Sure. So I moved to Silicon Valley at the turn of the century to work at Yahoo, where I worked for 11 years. During the course of that, I worked on Yahoo Finance for many years. This included processing of news finance feeds, working with a subset of the property, which was related to private personal banking.
Yeah.
So we were doing online ledgers, banking histories.
So you're writing scripts to pull this information and collate it and this type of thing, or something?
Right. So software to interact with bank feeds, to collect transaction histories, to provide people with an easy way to get aggregates over their accounts. All of these things now, of course, are readily available in 20 different apps for each component. But in 2000, this was all very, very new. Banks are very conservative by nature. And so there was a mismatch there in terms of the pace at which we were trying to run the sort of internet wave. So and then from there I did more work with news classification systems. Eventually I worked on a photos application, so Yahoo Photos, which for those who were part of the internet back then, coincided with the acquisition of Flickr. So this was the beginning of a more social way of using the internet, where people were tagging and creating tag clouds. And from there, I went and worked.
So your work to like automatic tag generation? Is that, or no?
No, this would be down in the guts of image storage, and so forth. Then from there, the move was towards the acquisition of a startup known as Delicious, which was very popular in the aughts, and this was sort of the big one of the big tagging apps. And this was the idea that you're out there reading on the internet, you found a URL, you think it's quite neat, you want to save it, you want to associate it with certain tags, but then you've got your identity, and so then you could have followers, and they'd say, oh, I've got a feed of so and so and they're following this theme and it's quite interesting, and so bring that together. And then it was a move to a group which was doing, how do we call it? It was called Build Your Own Search Service. And the idea was that we would create software as a service, is what it would be called now. The idea being that you as an individual could design a small search engine over a domain that you were interested in. And this was a system that combined structured search and internet search, and allowed you to sort of
Mm-hmm.
build build new ways of doing things. And if I think I'm right in saying that DuckDuckGo, which is now a
Yeah, is
fairly
it?
popular, I think early on they might have first started with that service. I'm not going to claim that as fact.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go and look it up. Um,
So
and
was that the
then
type of, sorry, just because I actually had an experience with a company here in Sweden who worked with, I think it was Norwegian tech. They had a system. I can't remember the name of it because we're going back 15,
was
20
was
years
it
now.
called Vespa?
No, it wasn't. It begins with O, I think.
Oh,
But they were like black box solutions that were sold to companies to create internal search engines. So like
yeah.
non-hierarchical thing. Do you recognize what I'm talking about? Or
Yeah, well, so part of it is that there was a structured search component that was acquired by Yahoo, and it came out of Scandinavia. And I can't remember. I think it was actually Norway. Um, that was
it was
the country from which this came. Yeah.
just this is completely random, but does a name called Findwise ring any bells? No. Okay, don't
Uh,
worry, don't worry. No, no.
not right now. No.
That they worked with that tech, and they were bought up by a big American organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. All right.
so
So
anyway, you worked with in that sort of like search functionality, so
yeah.
that they could create their own search
Yeah,
machines.
and then from there it went to a very elaborate system called the Web of Objects, and this was so just a brief sketch. The idea was that you could collect facts from different feeds, so it would be Twitter, Flickr, and the types of queries that people were running on the Yahoo search engine, and you
Mm.
could create essentially an ontology. Like you'd have a
Yeah.
cluster that would be Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you'd have one that would be for Maria Shriver, and then you'd be able to establish some relationships, and then as the content of these feeds changed, you would sort of be able to adjust these relationships, and this would be a facsimile of a type of knowledge.
Yeah.
Um,
It-
so
Correct me if I'm wrong. So it was because that's one of the key ideas I remember when I worked a little bit with this company was it's like that you do, the last thing you do you want the you don't want to go in with predefined structures for your data. You want the actual content of the data itself to generate those structures, and then, as you say, it becomes this. I don't like to use the word living, but I can't think of another word. But it's like a living relationship between the structure and the data.
right, I look at it maybe rather than living, I would say mutate.
Yeah, better, yeah.
Right, so you've got these bits that are facts, and then you've got the relations between them, and that's the more mutable aspect, these predicates that you establish. And so the idea was those could be mutated based on new inputs,
Yeah.
based on the types of questions people were asking in search engines, and so forth. And
So winding this forward, it's
yeah.
like to 2022. Although I actually just learned that ChatGPT has been around for 1.5 years, available as a beta, so that people have been trying. But ChatGPT is this is sort of like this is a little bit the system you've described there, but on complete and utter steroids. It's and beyond.
Right. So I've subscribed for access to the beta,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't yet been granted access. So the when I go to the page, I get 10 machine generated koans and a notice that the system is overloaded, and give us your email address and we'll get back to you. So so there we stand. Um, and so in the spirit of this discussion, I went on my phone and I said, well, what can I get for ChatGPT? And immediately there was, I think I came across three, but they're already expensive. They want subscriptions of $10 to $20 a month,
Yeah.
and so forth. And I wasn't particularly inclined to start forking over a lot of money, but I did
Yeah.
come across one which is based on Chat GPT 3, which allowed me 5 chats. And
Oh wow! I'm still. I got a free account like 2-3 weeks ago and have been playing with it, and it's been more or less unrestricted. So I'm sort of wondering how
well
that
then
happened.
then you had more success finding a vector into the space. So maybe you'll provide me with the name of the app you're using after.
I certainly will. Yeah, I certainly will.
Yeah.
But so and actually, I think I jumped the gun a little bit with Chat GPT. But so you've got this background. We'll come back to Chat GPT in a little bit. So you've got this background in tech in California.
Yeah.
But you've also got with you your interest in philosophy of freedom, anthroposophy. How, I mean, two very different worlds. What as somebody who's got an interest, like a strong tech interest, which I think is certainly less common for your average anthroposophist, if you're happy calling yourself that.
Yeah.
How how do you, what was it like living in like those two very different spheres?
Well, so in part the move to California specifically to work in tech um, was motivated. Um, well, let's try to characterize it. So I had been working, or I had worked in a Camp Hill community, sort of been fully embedded in sort of threefolding initiative, and at the same time, I had the sense, well, I can return, but I won't necessarily be able to leave. Meaning, if I stayed 15 years, it would be much more difficult to sort of engage with, let's say, corporate America, or sort of an idea of professional work outside of that type of context. And so I had started working in tech in the DC area, and from an from a purely personal point of view, there was an anxiety, right? Sort of the anxiety is, okay, you hear about AI, you hear about these intelligent systems, and so for me, I said, well, I need to go grapple with it, and this isn't to find an intellectual answer. It's actually to go in and experience what it's like to work in a purely abstract space, in an environment where not a single person really gives two bits about my interest in anthroposophy. So it's not even a topic of conversation. Not even the philosophy of freedom, right? So it's like, okay, you're essentially, I wanted to put myself in a place where I was, yeah, kind of on my own in the context, to sort of live through it and see what came of it. So there's this
That's that.
hiatus.
Sorry, go on.
No, there's this hiatus where my direct involvement with anthroposophy goes practically to zero. I'm not involved with the society. I'm not involved with any reading groups. I don't actually know any anthroposophists in the Bay Area. And I go and about 15 years. That was sort of the term of this experiment. And then things started opening up in a different way.
Can I dig a little bit there, because it's really interesting, this this need or to go out, and I mean, obviously it's like making a living, I can understand that part, but wanting to confront AI or wanting to confront the computer world, what was going on there? That sounds really interesting to have it nailed down so clearly. I want to take this battle type of thing.
Yeah. So it was sort of an ambient uncertainty, right? Like you've read all of this stuff, Mark. Okay. You read Steiner, you come to an appreciation that something like spiritual science is possible, and practical. But underlying that sort of experience is also this other sense of, I can't say that from myself. If that makes some sense, right? So it was, it's certainly not to say that I would take it as sort of a received dogma, but it's far. Now, if I say easier, this is not in any way a denigration, but it's much more comfortable to engage with these ideas in a community context where you're with people who have an openness to the ideas, who have essentially transcended a certain class of cultural prejudice. Right. So now what came, what I now see in retrospect is that by going into this world, I actually was engaging with almost like a refined essence of the fundamental scientific dogmas that come out of the Enlightenment, and they're essentially expressed in software, right? So software embodies the notion of mechanism. So mechanism is a big idea that comes out of the Enlightenment. Another is mathematism, right? Or sort of this urge to render everything in a mathematical or symbolic or algebraic form. And the other is almost total lack of sensory experience, right? So you end up in this world where, like for instance, you go and you work with a bunch of engineers and you say, well, proprioception is just not happening here. These people, myself included, are deep in their heads, working with a problem or a piece of software they're trying to design. And so that encounter, I think, has helped me become conscious of just how much of that tradition was within me, right? And it's curious, right? Because my education, I studied classics. So I was doing Greek and Latin. I didn't study the hard sciences. And yet over the course of time, I started to realize, wow, you've got a lot of this attitude. Attitude. I mean, you've got this style, and it's there in you. And so the sense started growing. It's like, wow, this is so pervasive in myself. I mean, obviously, it's in the
you mean just living in the thought space here? Is that, have I understood you correctly?
Right. The thought space, but then experiencing like I mean, these will be characterizations. I think one of the most surprising for me was, well, there are a couple. One was becoming conscious of how do we say, like a mathematical longing, right? So if you cast it in, let's say, the 12-foldness of human and cosmic thought. So this is very, very, very strongly motivated in the vector of mathematism, right? So it's like, but it was an impulse that I didn't realize I carried. And so I was working with software and working with systems, but I was always reading, and at a certain point I came across a researcher out of Microsoft who had done a lot of work with what are known as modeling systems or proving systems, with a special emphasis on what is known as temporal logic. And the idea was, or Leslie Lamport is the researcher, and he's won, he's been awarded a Turing Award, which is sort of the equivalent of a Nobel for software. And he wrote this magnificent book called Specifying Systems. And it's a full exercise in understanding and learning to use a symbolic language that he defined, to understand the basic behavior of a system using purely Boolean logic with some temporal modifiers. And this, for me, it was, this profound relief. I was just like, wow, this is it. And of course, I became quite ridiculous, I suppose, in some ways, as I would go talking to my colleagues and saying, we've got to do this. And then we'll be able to understand the system in its intention. Now, intention meaning its logical purpose before we start writing the software. And the reaction almost always was, that's just too abstract. Like my colleagues would just push back and say, you've gone off the reservation here. So that was an interesting experience. And the other was that and this will be a nod to Sweden. All right. So a lot of the early work was done in a lot of the early work that I was doing was done in C++, and obviously we're working on internet systems and distributed systems with a lot of characteristics of asynchronous communication and failures and so forth. And I came across this wonderful programming language that had been developed within Ericsson, and it was designed for telephony systems. And I started using it, and it was this like explosion. And the thing there was that it was a very, very movable system. So in a very sort of crude analogy, it's a little closer to sort of the etheric style of thinking, because it allowed
flexibility in there,
flexibility and so forth. And again, um, the reaction from a lot of my colleagues was, this is stupid, I can do it. And then they would go and try to implement it in a different way. So that was sort of a bewildering experience for me, because I didn't understand the degree of resistance that I got. And so this was while I was at Yahoo. Now, there were a couple of guys that I knew. They had broken off and they went and started WhatsApp. And when they did that, they worked primarily with this language, which is called Erlang. So it was again, just to characterize it, it was coming to appreciate this sort of drive for mathematism, or sort of logical certainty, and then this appreciation for this flexibility and fluency of a language like Erlang in the context of this incredible resistance. And it was striking to me, because I started getting to this point where it's like, you're working, when you're writing software, you're working at an intense level of mental effort. Like, you're really putting it in, and it's sense free. It's purely sense free. And so in a way, it's a form of meditation, right? Or let's say let me take that back. It's an intensification of consciousness. But if you take some of Steiner's exercises, say, well, first you're going to build the image, then you have to expunge the image and enter into a sphere of silence, right? So what I felt like I was up against was an environment where all of this effort, all the intimate effort that's being deployed by these programmers, then becomes such a matter of identity that when you come and present like a countervailing model, it's not just a matter of scientific disagreement or technical disagreement. It became quite visceral.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very, very intense. And I was like, oh my gosh, so this is where I started saying, okay, here I am in a culture that I could characterize as largely agnostic, not concerned with matters of the spirit, not religious, whatever. None of that is meant to be denigrating. It's just characterize it. And yet there are all these dilemmas that you would essentially associate with spiritual struggle, right? And so
if I understanding that, would it we often like generalizations, of course, going on here, but you talk about artistic people as being sensitive souls that also become very attached to their own creations and find it very difficult to take criticism and that type of thing. Is that what you're a little bit of what you're describing as well, or is that, does it only like capture an aspect of it?
So if I were to cue off of that, I would say the criticism of the creation would be perhaps a bit more a matter of like saying, well, I don't particularly care for the system that you've implemented, or I don't think that your solution is the best one. For me, in the prior remarks, it's rather more that a different way of thinking, and what we use over there is, we'll say it's a computational model, right? So it's a different computational model, or you could say it's a different paradigm, right? This different paradigm allows for a different way of engaging with the problem. And if you're in this other paradigm, your solution is going to look much different.
Yeah.
The difference itself not being the measure of worth, but sometimes you can actually achieve things more directly in this different paradigm than the other. And so the switching between paradigms seemed to be the sticking point, right? So people were very, very fixated on, well, from this approach, I can do all. Right?
Hence your interest in Betty and the 12 worldviews.
Yeah, well, for sure, because also in the level of effort to gain a level of fluency with a programming language, to gain a level of fluency with the style of abstraction that is coordinate with the paradigm and the language that you're using. That takes time, right? Like if you're actually going to get out there and do something, that's a considerable effort. So being confronted with a different sort of paradigm unseats a lot of that. And so it was, to me, it was very interesting. I was like, wow, okay, so we can get to a point where these things become very, very rigid. Now there's another nod to, no, it's not going to be to Sweden directly, but there's a wonderful computer scientist, Peter Van Roy, who is at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. And he worked with a gentleman in Sweden, and I can't remember which of the universities in Sweden it is, an Egyptian gentleman with the name of Saif Hariri. And they wrote a book called Concepts, Techniques, and Models of Computer Programming. Perhaps I've gotten the title a bit wrong, but their whole idea was, well, what we need is a multi-paradigmatic approach. And so they're very explicit, saying, well, this language gives you this view of the situation. This language allows this approach to the situation. And so it was a level of fluency across that style of thinking. And I thought it was very liberating. I was like, wow, this is really great stuff. Of course, it didn't carry much water with my colleagues. So there again, I was, stranded. Having read somewhat deeply in areas that were not my natural inclination, and finding that the level of interest was comparatively low, and so yeah, just another way of sort of waking myself up to some of these less conscious habits that I inherited.
So you've mentioned this mathematism. No, it is just mathematism in my.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the best way to pronounce it is, but there it is.
I was. You've mentioned before you read a book from Silicon Valley to Gondishapur, or
yeah, by Paul Emberson. Yeah.
By Paul. Tell us. So the ideas. Give us a brief flavour of how. So what some of the central ideas are in that book, as like how, because we're talking about Ahriman, it's like the Ahrimanic impulse, or like as being basically born there.
Right.
How and if I've understood you correctly, you do see that happening there, or I'm not quite sure how best to phrase it.
Right. Well, so after our conversation, initial conversation, I said, well, I better give it a read, because I haven't read it in almost 24 years.
Yeah.
So I did as of today reach the midpoint. So I'll make some comments, and initially I'll factor out the interactions that Emerson brings out from Steiner's studies in karmic relationships and so forth, and just focus a bit on the story which he brings out with respect of Bacon of Verulam,
Yeah.
and how he sort of grapples with this new ambition to bring a science, and the things that I well let's there's sort of three vectors that might give some jumping off points. The one is his famous classification of sort of four idols, sort of the idols. How did he call them? They were idols of the tribe, idols of the theater, idols of the marketplace, and idols. And the last one I can't fully bring to mind just now. But the general idea is, look, we've got these areas where if it's idols of the tribe, we're dealing with an inheritance of ideas from the culture. I believe that's true. Well, let me not get it all mashed up right now. Let me just focus on idols of the marketplace. So the general idea is, he's saying, look, there are these different sectors: human nature, your personal biography, that which you inherit through learning, and then the arena of commerce in everyday life. And in each one of these areas, there are certain habits which are going to corrupt our ability to achieve knowledge. And when he gets to the idols of the marketplace, he really starts, as I recall, starts to emphasize that the problem is words, right? So words are the source of confusion, and so we need to somehow grapple with words. And if we can just, almost as if we can be done with words, we can get, and this is very crude, and I'll watch this and go back and find some errors in my recounting, perhaps. But
no,
so,
but I think you're capturing some really important essences just in that, because my mind just went straight off to the idea that freedom is only possible if each person has their own language. If you've got this external structure, it's imposed on how you're supposed to speak. Let's call it pre-Babel, where everybody spoke the same language. There is no possibility of freedom.
yep.
So part of being a free individual is having dominion over your language, and what you're painting there is this desire to get everybody to speak the same.
Right.
Or am I misinterpreting what you're saying?
No. I think it's, well, I would sort of look at it as so there's, I think it's a polarity that I believe I became more aware of through poetic diction from Owen Barfield. So and I'll be corrected on this, but let's say there's a polarity between multivalence and univalence. Like, words, as they're more alive, have more resonances, right? And in sort of a literalist mentality, those resonances are ambiguities, and those ambiguities are the death of us. And so we've got to wrestle down to a univalence, right? Because then there's the one true thing.
Yeah.
Once you've got that, then you're good. So I sort of I heard, or I read the that passage in that sense. So in addition to that relationship with words, he's now on his way to becoming chancellor, and so he's dealing with a great deal of court intrigue. And so he's got his own intelligence service, as various people would, to sort of snoop around. And so he's also got the challenge of how do we transmit knowledge in a way that's secure from tampering, right? And so he essentially invents the binary code, which becomes the basis for digital technology. And he comes up with it, and the descriptions that.
So he literally, just to get that, literally cryptography, he gave birth to cryptography, so like with zeros and ones back then.
Well. So we have to say that the story of encoding goes far further back, right?
Uh-huh.
So I don't want to make any grand claim that he's the father of cryptography,
but he pushed it. Yeah.
This is about encoding. This isn't so much about the effort to make things obscure.
Okay, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's not like what you would think of, like the secure channel that I use to deal with my bank. He's saying, like, how can I encode and transmit? And because he comes up with a mapping of the then extant, I think only 24 letters of the English alphabet to sequences of A's and B's, he develops this way of saying, look, with a bell, or with a lamp, or with other at hand technologies, you can transmit at a distance, and ensure that the content is received on the other end. So there's the encoding, and then the last is this fantasy he has of, and I can't remember if it's in New Atlantis right now or not. I'll have to go back and refresh my memory. But these people, these travelers, end up on this island, and this island has sort of a priesthood of very learned men, and they have this whole hierarchical structure of how knowledge is acquired, how it's collated, how it's evaluated, how it's measured for utility, how it's I'm going to say commercialized, how it's put to use, and so forth. And it's a very involved hierarchy of roles. And the very fascinating thing to me that Emerson brings out is, well, if you look at this, this is essentially a characterization of a computer, or the essential behavior of what we've now encoded in computers, and underlying it, of course, is the idea that knowledge can be acquired inductively, right? So we're in this point where he's a full-blown nominalist, and all these words are just confusions, and let's get to the real deal. And the real deal is this empiricism of the sensory realm. And so then let's collect facts, right? And we'll collect lots of facts, and then we'll induce, and from the induction we'll get this whole new world. And so that in one sense is a characterization of machine learning, which is massive amounts of data, from which we then try to infer, induce, and generate insight. So again, that's a very blunt summary, but I thought it quite interesting that we're looking now 200-300 years back, 400 years, and there's this current that still moves through the culture, which is very squarely in this vein of understanding the human being as a mechanism, understanding knowledge is simply a matter of induction from sense experience, and so maybe I'll stop there for just now. But there's quite a lot just in the story. There's more that can be brought out.
There's lots of interesting lines of thinking coming up there. Just going off the last bit you were saying there about this idea that it's like sensory impressions can sort of like convey knowledge. Of course, that's the complete opposite of where Steiner's coming from in the philosophy of freedom. That it's yeah, you couldn't be more wrong about man's relationship to the world.
Right. You're totally upside down.
Yeah,
you're totally upside down. So yeah, in the spirit of, like, you know, more extended sort of further talks, one contributing book which I am currently reading, which is really wonderful, is a book called Science Set Free by Rupert Sheldrake.
Another name,
And
yeah.
And his approach there is to take what he says are what he characterizes as 10 dogmas of science, and then show how contemporary science itself calls those dogmas into question. And if we freed ourselves of the dogmas, we would be going a great deal further with science itself. Yeah. And it's quite interesting, again, because now you've got Bacon with his 4 idols, you've got Sheldrake with his 10 dogmas, and then you have Steiner. So Steiner is upending the story from direct observation of the processes of consciousness. Sheldrake is upending things quite a bit just by saying, hey, look at where science has gotten us to, and if we just take the contemporary state of science, then and the dogmas he's drawing out generally fall into this unconscious materialism, yeah, that's still rumbling along out of the Enlightenment, and certainly through the 19th century and on.
I was listening to the GA1 in Goethean Science, I think it is called. There's a series of articles that Steiner wrote as he was asked to write introduction to Goethe's scientific works. And in one of those articles, the Kirchner edition, I think it was, he was asked to write a series of articles. And in one of them, he makes this statement that in the Middle Ages, the dogmatism was in religious thinking, and everything was judged according to these religious precepts. And he says that our current age is suffering from a similar unilateral infatuation with the sensory world, in the sense that we only accept, if we only accept as true something which can be seen and proven with the senses, without understanding the relationship of thinking to this process. What the criticism about religion, where it was based on dogma, and thinking was just, it had to perform according to the rules that it was allowed to perform to. That's a very clumsy way. It was only allowed to have certain thought forms, based on what was considered religiously true. So you have these formal propositions of like what was doctrine and what wasn't, and anything that's like foul of that couldn't be discussed. And it's a similar situation with science, that there is this perception that the truth is the material world, whilst failing to understand everything that we say about the material world is based on our thinking around it, but that's not the only thing that is possible to think about.
Yeah, so that's that opens quite some interesting areas. Going back to New Atlantis from the characterizations in the Emerson book, the imagination of this learned hierarchy, very closely aligned with the state, has somewhat of an ecclesiastical feel, right? These are high priests. They, are meting out knowledge to the people. One of the frustrations with words, I think, for Bacon was, even though these learned people have the truth or something closer to the truth, the language is captured by the vulgar, right? So the language is misused, and so the priests can't communicate. But there's this underlying sense that this knowledge is power is now overtaking the dogma of the church as the power, and so we're in a different relationship to dogmatism. And I think it follows from the Church of Bacon that the fixation on raw sensory experience as the only ground of reality is there. But Angus, I have to go because I have this other meeting.
Oh, it's that time. Oh God, it's just getting interesting. I wanted to. We're gonna have to pick this up at some other time.
And we can do a redo. I can finish the Emerson and we can give it another go, because it'll come together, and I don't mind re-talking or whatever. We can.
Okay, let's do that. Let's plan another one, because you were just getting into a fascinating area with censorship of information as a way of controlling what the populace is allowed to know. I think we've already got like ChatGPT being used there. People jailbreaking ChatGPT.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, my sense is we can go a couple iterations, and then things will really start to cook, and it'll be quite interesting. All right.
Okay, so I won't post this, but we'll build on it. We'll try and talk again.
Are you able to send me a link so I can listen back on it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Sure.
That would be instructive to me, and then I can sort of refine my style a bit, and we can give it another whirl.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get it more tightly packed. No, really good.
Yeah,
excellent.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Speak to you soon. Bye.